Hey everyone, greetings. It's Naomi Wolf, and I'm back as I promised within 48 hours of Leviticus 2 and 3. We're reading Leviticus 4. And for those of you who are following along, in Leviticus 2 and 3, we had directions about how individuals should bring their own offerings to the tent of meeting and slaughter their offering, the animal, the sheep, the goat, themselves, not the priest. The priest is just a helper. And the priest then burns the offering, and this is a reach nichoach le'Adonai, a pleasing spirit to the Lord. We talked about how it's derivatively translated a sweet smell to the Lord or a pleasing odor to the Lord, but reach is spirit, a ghost, a wind, as well as scent. So it's really much more profound to interpret that whole section, which I encourage you to go back and listen to if you haven't listened to it, as understanding that through bringing your offering willingly, without hesitation, taking an unblemished animal, meaning an animal that's valuable in the marketplace, not something that you're not going to be able to eat or sell, right? Giving it, yielding it to God, the priests put it through lechem esh, which is so beautiful, bread or food of fire, right? And then it turns into reach nichoach le'Adonai, the sweet savor to the Lord, the pleasing spirit to the Lord. That's how you lehakriv, which is to draw near to God. And we talked about how, and this just blew my mind, I'm just recapping a tiny bit. We talked about how korban, which is translated as sacrifice, actually comes from the same root as to draw near. Really, if you were being literal with that verb, which doesn't really exist in English, it would be to nearen, right? Like to quicken, to hasten, to nearen, ever nearing, right? And so korban comes from the same root, karov, leakriv, kerev, kufresh, vet, and that is to draw near. So through your offerings, you draw near. And the sense of offering and nearing was built in from the very beginning of the idea of making an offering. And I would say it's been bastardized or, degraded in translation to mean sacrifice. And I think that's really deeply interesting because we talked about this a little in the last time, but just to recap, we have this very perverse or perverted sense that, God is always mad at us. So we always need to make sacrifices to appease him. When, if you understand the language, in the Hebrew, the way the Hebrew is originated, it's like, okay, you want to draw near this disembodied being that is everywhere, everything. How do you get close to this disembodied being? You can't hug him. You can't, kiss him. Well, if you come willingly with a gift, put it, ritualistically present it, put it through the fire, you are nearing your nearness, your sacrifice, your nearingness, your korban. So I just think that's amazing. And let's move on now to chapter 4 in Leviticus. And I confessed, again, just to recap, that I was procrastinating, not very edifyingly, hesitating to dive into Leviticus. Honestly, I'm hesitating to dive into Numbers and Deuteronomy as well, because I was afraid it would be heavy sledding and I wouldn't know what to do with it. But as we found the last time, when you just, jump in to the water, the Hebrew, which is, just magical. It really makes you think there is such thing as a magical language, right? It's just a sacred language, because I don't even understand how it does this, but it just opens up, blossoms, yields meaning upon meaning upon meaning. And what we saw in the last 2 chapters is that that word, that verb lehakriv, to nirin, was repeated in different ways, like 6 or 7 times. So completely that was the theme. So now we're going on to a really interesting chapter. Again, I never would have thought it was interesting before I really started thinking about it, because it's more about how to make a sacrifice or an offering or a nearingness, right? And this time it's the chapter 4 teaches people how to slaughter a bullock, and a bullock is a higher level of offering in a nomadic society, a shepherd society. Remember, they're still in the desert, right? All they've got, their only wealth is their cattle, their sheep, their goats. They're not farming yet. They're not settled yet. They haven't reached the land of Israel. So the hierarchy of animals is the hierarchy of wealth. And so, a dove is kind of, a nickel, a goat or a sheep are kind of $1. Well, a bullock would be, $100, right? And these are, obviously, these are not literal values or denominations. I'm just saying it's like different categories of value, different categories of wealth. So, the bullock is very valuable, of course. A lot of foraging goes into it. A lot of care goes into it. It's a big animal. It could sire many other bullocks. From the bullocks come calves and meat and milk and all the things that cows provide. So here we see that the most valuable offering is reserved for the most serious people in the community, or the most authoritative people in the community, and some of the biggest harms that they've done. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact that in the last 2 chapters, it really didn't talk about the nature of it didn't talk about guilt, right? It didn't. It talked about your offering of the sheep or the goat as being, or the meal with oil, the matzah, as being a shalmim, a way of creating plural of peace, right? P-E-A-C-E, peace, pieces. It created pieces, P-E-A-C-E-S. And we talked about how that's between oneself and God. And by the way, I had a very affirmative note from a listener who is Muslim. And I think that this is very much the theme of Ramadan, that you don't, fast during the day for God because he wants you hungry. You're purifying yourself so that you can get closer to God, so you can receive God more effectively, not get distracted by appetite and sensation and desire. So I think that, Islam has really thought about this, how do we purify ourselves? So, they're the same religion, Islam and Judaism in many, many ways, the Abrahamic religions. They come from the same root, the father, Abraham, and is the father of both, the people who became the originators of Islam and the people who became the children of Israel. Were cousins, as they often say back in better days, when a Jewish family, would visit the West Bank or the old city in Jerusalem, when things weren't as tense and miserable as they are now. Jews and Arabs in Palestine and Israel would say, we're cousins. And it's true. We come from the same lineage, the same ethnicity. So let's move on to the really interesting thing. Chapter 4 is about a category of ethical lapse that I've never really thought about. And this is one of those moments where you think, wow, God is not fooling around. God is really, what is the word? Sets a high bar, and it's not a bar we can't reach, but it's we're not supposed to lie around on the couch watching Netflix and thinking, if I just send a check to the church or the synagogue, I'll be fine. No. So Leviticus chapter 4 talks about unintended sin. Now, before we get into the chapter, and I think this is a good way to structure our reading. I started to do it in the last chapter, lifting out like thematic words in Hebrew and explaining them. So the words I want to talk about before we dive into chapter 4 are chet, which is translated in modern translations as sin, like straight up sin, again, with that Catholic vibe, right? Which our language, of course, in English is very much, is not judgmental, it's just historic, is very much influenced by, of course, the Catholic Church, because that was the worldview and consciousness of speakers of English for, 800 years before the Reformation, right? So it's deeply influenced by Catholic ideas, our language itself. So the word sin, and various Protestant denominations after certainly engage with the idea of sin very actively. Not all of them. Some are, it's all grace and they don't worry about sin too much. And others are like hellfire and damnation, sin, 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 right? Like Baptists, like Southern Baptists. But I really want to stress the Christian, Catholic and Protestant idea of sin is different from the Hebrew word chet. All right. So what does chet mean? It's not good. I mean, I don't want to say it's, a bubble bath and a walk in the woods. No, but it is not the same. The Orthodox Union, which is an Orthodox Jewish site, says the Hebrew word for sin is chet and derives from the Hebrew verb meaning to miss the mark or target, end quote, quote unquote. Thus, at a most basic level, this is them speaking, and these are Orthodox Jews, these are serious Jews. Thus, at a most basic level, we Jews view sin not as a permanent birth stain upon our humanity, but as a regrettable action whose effect can be remedied. Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf, and I have a message. President Trump is in the process of what he calls draining the swamp. But many in the MAGA movement and the MAHA movement are asking if he'll expose the entire pandemic. There's enough public evidence for people to be concerned who injected themselves in what has turned out to be a massive experiment. If you were compelled to get the shot for work, travel, maybe you just trusted the system, check out this natural solution formulated by hero Dr. Peter McCullough in collaboration with the Wellness Company. They just leveled up their original detox formula, and it costs $30 less. We are introducing the 3-in-1 Ultimate Spike Detox. It's now conveniently consolidated into a single capsule with 4 times more nattokinase, 500 milligrams of bromelain, and 500 milligrams of turmeric root extract. Nattokinase, an enzyme researched for its anti-clotting effects, may work to break down spike proteins. Combined with bromelain and curcumin, it provides a potent blend for detoxification and cellular support. Crafted with 100% natural ingredients, Ultimate Spike Detox is backed by research. It offers effective support for your cell's natural repair and recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. Peter McCullough, a top freedom-fighting doctor who risked it all to bring you the truth. Head over to dailyclouthealth.com and use the code DailyClout to get 10% off. Plus free shipping. Again, that's dailyclouthealth.com and use the code DailyClout to get 10% off and get back to that pre-COVID feeling. Great. And then you go on to Chabad.org and they elucidate sin or chet, and they translate it as missing the mark, or they elucidate it, missing the mark. And they say the Hebrew word for sin, chet, means something akin to a missed opportunity, like an arrow missing its mark. All right. And this is really important, guys. Like, I guess part of me feels like part of me thinks, why should anyone, Jews are 4% of the population. Why should what's probably mostly Christian or atheist or, non-denominational audience really care about the details of how Hebrew describes sin in the Hebrew Bible, right? Well, I think it's really, really, really important, because these are not like words like shoelace, that don't have impact on our consciousness and our lives. The word for sin in English and the word chet in Hebrew are absolutely fundamental organizing principle words for, Jewish or biblical consciousness. I'm going to say biblical because Judaism didn't exist yet. It's the children of Israel trying to figure it out thousands of years ago. And the word sin obviously has been the organizing principle in Christianity, right? In the West for 2,000 years. But especially, subsequent to the translation of the Vulgate into English. But I mean, sin was how the Middle Ages were organized in Western Europe. I mean, literally, there was an economy of, and Chaucer, kind of mocked this, but there was an economy of indulgences and penances where you would literally buy forgiveness, from the church for your sin. And sin is I'm just going to be honest. I mean, I'm always honest with you guys, but I'm just going to say what's in my heart. Some of the Christian definitions of sin, I'm just going to be honest, to me as a Jew, seem very demoralizing. Like, either you believe, I'm not going to be reductive about Christianity. Okay, please don't think I'm doing that. But if sin is, for instance, something we're born with, which is a Christian idea, and it's original sin, we can't get rid of it. We're just born kind of deformed and broken. That's pretty depressing, right? And I understand and respect that, in those belief systems, the blood of Jesus, the sacrifice of Jesus washes away that sin. But I also worry that, this is a very painful way to think about the human condition, right? That we're born messed up. We're born ruined. How could God love us, right? It takes this terrible event in history, the death of Jesus, to reconcile us with God. I'm just being honest. To me, that's a sad and painful scenario. Or a lot of Christians I know, and maybe this is a little, more hopeful and will get me in less trouble. A lot of people who were born and raised Christian or with that idea of sin couldn't relate to it at all. And as a result, kind of distanced themselves from the church and from prayer and from faith and a faith community altogether. So that's not good, right? So I'm not ever in this series going to tell anyone what to believe, what to think. And I always want to stress, I respect all religions except Satanism, as I said last time. But I mean, all religions that, bring people closer to actual God. But think about the difference between that idea of sin, which is a mistranslation, right? Like, I haven't looked at sin in the Greek or the Aramaic. I will, because maybe it's not a mistranslation from the Greek and the Aramaic. But in the Revised Standard Version or other modern translations that are translating the Old Testament from the Hebrew, and they translate it sin, just that literally, that's not really right. That's really not right, right? So again, you heard it from the hardcore Jews. These are not like, random twice a year Jews. This is the Orthodox Union. These people are devoted. And I've read this multiple times. I know it's true. Chet is missing the mark. So it means you messed up, right? I'm not going to be vulgar. You blew it, right? But it doesn't mean you're hopeless or going to hell or, damned forever. It means you have work to do to clean it up. That's what it means in Judaism. And to me, just me subjectively, that is I'm not saying that's true because who knows what's true, but I'm saying to me that is an easier psychological burden to carry. And the other reason it's more comfortable for me, well, it's more accurate because that's what the word actually is, chet. But also think of the implications. You're not born messed up. You're born just fine. There's nothing wrong with you, in Judaism. Like we don't have the idea of original sin. So, everyone's just born perfectly fine the way they are as little babies. And then they make dumb choices along the way because they're human. They miss the mark. There is a mark for sure. They miss it. They blow it. They make mistakes. They make horrible mistakes, but it is a temporary condition if you clean it up. But your cleaning it up is on you in Judaism. It's not like if I go to confession, the priest will clean me, or if I, it doesn't matter because, Jesus died for my sins. So he took care of it, right? I'm not being reductive. I'm just saying those are very alien ideas to Judaism. And if you think about it, these are completely different ways of approaching the world. I'm not going to say which is better or worse. But which is accurate is missing the mark, at least in the Hebrew Bible. So the other thing I want to talk about is the word asham, and we'll get into this. But asham is translated in English as guilt or guilt offering. And it's asham, guilt offering, a state of guilt. But it's also, and this is more aligned with the original, the condition of having committed an offense. Again, it's asham. You can become asham, and we're going to see this in this chapter, if you act unfaithfully, but also if you sin unintentionally against any of Yahweh's holy things. All right. And a state of guilt or the condition of having committed an offense. So I just want you to think about that. It's also defined as offense or trespass or fault. So these are just like very different, have words with different resonance than guilt in the Christian English sense, because guilt is forever, in Christianity. Like you're just guilty. You're guilty of sin, right? And it's very, very serious. You're going to go to hell. Believe it or not, the children of Israel at this time, and really late into Judaism, really kind of to this day, don't have a concept of hell. That's a deeper question, and I'll get into it later. But, there's definitely like Gehinnom, where spirits wander, but the kind of pitchforks and devils and, Satan at the gate of hell is a very, CE, Common Era, Christian notion, Catholic notion specifically. So I'm not saying which is true. Who knows? There may well be an actual hell, but it means a very different approach to what humans are here for, right? And what their burdens are, or their responsibilities. So the reason I stress this is that in Hebrew, this word guilt in the context of what's translated as sin could also be missing the mark in the context of a trespass or a fault, or needing a compensation for the offense, or an offense, right? So that's something you do that is fixable. Oh, I've offended my mom. I've offended my colleague. You can fix that. It's not forever. You're not always in a state of offense. Obviously, you will be in a state of offense forever if you don't do anything about it. But this is why at Yom Kippur, we actually have, are you guys interested in this? Just let me know in the comments, because, this could just be, random Jew talking about Judaism. On Yom Kippur, we don't just confess to God. what we did wrong in the last year. It's very important that we go to our loved ones and specifically ask forgiveness for offenses that we committed, pay our debts. There's a window of 10 days, before the gates of heaven close and the, book of life is inscribed, what's going to happen to you in the next year. It's very intense, but you literally have to go up to people you've offended or wronged or cheated or whatever, and apologize. Like the 12-step program is every year in Judaism. So I love that. I think it's very useful, and it's, your loved ones come up to you and say, I'm sorry for having wronged you. If they want to be specific, I'm sorry I was so awful about, your leaving dirty towels around all year, and then you say, I forgive you, or you talk it through and then you forgive them. But you can't it's not okay with God in the Jewish context to just apologize to God, right? If you've wronged a fellow human, you have to fix it with a fellow human. So it's a very much a faith tradition that's about this life. It's not that the life to come is not important, but we're not living this life only for the life to come. We have responsibilities in this life. I just wanted to bring that up because chapter 4 is about, translated as being about sin and guilt, and that's not true except reductively, or it's true with caveats. All right, chapter 4, and this is the Hebrew Bible. You can find it, the Geneva Bible, 1560. You can find it on the Internet Archive, which I love because they list the author as God. All right, so chapter 4, the offering for sins done of ignorance for the priest and the congregation, the ruler and the private men. And then the text starts. Moreover, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any shall sin through ignorance in any of the commandments of the Lord, which ought not to be done, but shall do contrary to any of them, if the priest that is anointed do sin according to the sin of the people, then shall he offer for his sin which he has sinned a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord for a sin offering. And he shall bring the bullock unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, and shall put his hand upon the bullock's head, and shall kill the bullock before the Lord. And the priest that is anointed shall take of the bullock's blood and bring it into the tabernacle of the congregation. Then the priest shall dip his fingers in the blood and sprinkle of the blood 7 times before the Lord, before the veil of the sanctuary. The priest also shall put some of the blood before the Lord upon the horns of the altar of sweet incense, which is in the tabernacle of the congregation. Then shall he pour all the rest of the blood of the bullock at the door, at the foot of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall take away all the fat of the bullock for the sin offering, to wit, that is to say, the fat that covers the innards, and all the fat that is about, meaning around the innards. He shall take away also the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, and upon the flanks, and the caul upon the liver with the kidneys, as it was taken away from the bullock of the peace offerings. And the priest shall burn them upon the altar of the burnt offering. But the skin of the bullock and all his flesh, with his head and his legs and his innards and his dung, shall be borne out. So he shall carry the whole bullock out of the host, meaning the community, unto a clean place where ashes are poured, and shall burn him on wood in the fire, where the ashes are cast out, shall he be burnt. And if the whole congregation of Israel shall sin through ignorance, right? Did you know you could do this? And the thing be hid from the eyes of the multitude, and have done again against any of the commandments of the Lord, which should not be done, and have offended, when the sin which they have committed shall be known, then the congregation shall offer a young bullock for the sin, and bring him before the tabernacle of the congregation. And the elders of the congregation shall put their hands upon the head of the bullock before the Lord, and he shall kill the bullock before the Lord. Then the priest that is anointed shall bring of the bullock's blood into the tabernacle of the congregation, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord, even before the veil. Also, he shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar, which is before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of the congregation. Then shall he pour all the rest of the blood at the foot of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall take all his fat from him and burn it upon the altar. And the priest shall do with this bullock as he did with the bullock for his sin, so shall he do with this. So the priest shall make an atonement for them, and it shall be forgiven them. For he shall carry the bullock without the host, meaning outside of the community, and burn him as he burnt the first bullock, for it is an offering for the sin of the congregation. When a ruler shall sin and do through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord his God, which should not be done and shall offend, if one show unto him his sin which he hath committed, then shall he bring for his offering an he-goat without blemish, a male goat without blemish, and shall lay his hand upon the head of the he-goat and kill it in the place where he should kill the burnt offering before the Lord, for it is a sin offering. Then the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it upon the horns of the burnt offering altar, and shall pour the rest of his blood at the foot of the burnt offering altar, and shall burn all his fat upon the altar as the fat of the peace offering. So the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his sin, and it shall be forgiven him. Likewise, if any of the people of that land shall sin through ignorance in doing against any of the commandments of the Lord, which should not be done, and shall offend, if one show him his sin which he has committed, then he shall bring for his offering a she-goat without blemish for his sin which he has committed. And he shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering and flay the sin offering in the place of the burnt offering. Then the priest shall take of the blood thereof with his finger and put it upon the horns of the burnt offering altar and pour all the rest of the blood thereof at the foot of the altar, and shall take away all his fat as the fat of the peace offerings is taken away. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And the priest shall make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. And if he bring a lamb for his sin offering, he shall bring a female without blemish, and shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering, and he shall flay it for a sin offering in the place where he should kill the burnt offering. Thus then the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it upon the horns of the burnt offering altar, and shall pour all the rest of the blood thereof at the foot of the altar. And he shall take away all the fat thereof, as the fat of the lamb of the peace offerings is taken away. Then the priest shall burn it upon the altar, as with the oblations of the Lord made by fire. The priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his sin that he has committed, and it shall be forgiven him. So that is the Geneva Bible, 1560. And so what comes out for you from that reading? Do you feel like the eye of God is watching you at every moment to see if you mess up and is going to punish you? Or is this literally like that repetition of, and it shall be forgiven him, and it shall be forgiven him? To me, this is a really reassuring section. It says, like, I know you, I made you, you're going to make horrible mistakes, right? You're going to do things that you feel just bad about. And the very interesting thing is this concept of sins that people didn't know they had committed. In our ideology, I mean, look what's happening right now with COVID. I'm just going to say it. All these people who masked children, locked people down, mandated an injection into their bodies, killed them, basically, risked their health, sterilized them, disabled them. The talking points right now are, we didn't know. We didn't know. How could we have known? We didn't know. And even in, Western law, not knowing, is exonerating, right? If you didn't know that you're not exonerating completely, but if you didn't know that your product was going to hurt people, that's different from knowing and covering it up, right? Fraud goes into this. When did they know? What did the president know, and when did he know it? But in this section of the Hebrew Bible, that's not a, get out of jail free card at all. This section, when I started by saying God sets a high bar, but we can attain it, right? Because he will forgive us when we fall short of it if we, meet him in the middle at the tent of meeting. In this ideology, you can commit crimes you don't even know about, or sins you don't even know about, or guilt, offenses you don't know about, and you are responsible for them, and you are responsible for, getting right with God, for sure, even if you didn't know. And that's why each of these examples, I think there are like 4 examples, the people, the ruler. I think there are 2 other examples of people who may sin, right? Or commit a chet. In each case, or often in this chapter, it says when this is brought to their attention. So it totally takes on board this human situation of, I didn't know I would, be, well, I just think about my vaccinating my kids, I didn't know that what the dangers were back when they were tiny. I thought I was doing the right thing. Now I know better. Maybe it's not a great example, because is that an offense? Maybe. Anyway, I should be conscious of it. But maybe an example is abortion, right? A lot of people have abortions, covered by a pro-choice discourse that says it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. Then sadly, later on in their lives, they realize it is something very profound and very sad and very serious and very morally intense. I'm not telling people how to feel. I just know a lot of women feel this way. So that would be a good example of, I didn't know, but it was a chet. I fell short of the mark. I need to make up for it. I'm not telling people how to be. I'm just saying that's an example. Carolyn Carson, we have blind spots, things not in our conscious awareness. Very well said. I mean, I think a lot of people living in a secular society commit offenses all the time, and that society says they're not offenses. Another example is pornography, right? No big deal. Everyone watches porn. But it is, in my view, subjectively, an offense against your partner. And against your marriage, and a form of infidelity. I think so, personally. I'm not telling anyone else how to feel, because you're looking at other naked people and not your partner, right? So that's an example. A lot of people may think, because the culture says it's nothing, that it's not an offense. And then maybe if they get closer to God, or read the Bible, or think more about love, or whatever, they may change their minds, right? And think, wow, I really did that. That wasn't good for my partner. That wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my marriage. It wasn't good for my relationship with God. Maybe I'll, go to God with my offering, because that was a chet. I'm not going to tell you, I think this is one of those interesting moments where probably as I'm speaking, I can think of my own life of half a dozen examples of something that at the time you thought wasn't a chet, and then you grew as a person, and you realized, wow, that really is a chet. I've got to do better. I've got to make amends. Personal behaviors. Like I can think of myself. I can be very sure I'm right. And my loved ones say I sometimes don't listen. Well, in my head, I'm thinking, I'm listening, I just don't agree with you. But if I were being very evolved, I might actually experience that I'm not listening, right? So that's definitely a chet, right? If they're experiencing me as not listening, no matter what I think is happening, something's wrong there. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you to enumerate, but if you want to be, I think everyone can be a Jew, if they want to be a Jew. I think Jesus's point is this is for everybody, right? So I don't mean literally a Jew because that's a whole thing, but, everyone can receive the moral teaching of this book, right? And be part of this community. That's my belief. So if you want to do that, then you're welcomed into a community or into a way of thinking that's definitely about, when you realize you've caused harm, you have to go address it, and so chapter 4 is about addressing it. Okay, so now Carolyn Carson said something else quite beautiful. And I think she was responding to my talk about forgiveness, that iteration of it shall be forgiven, it shall be forgiven. And maybe she was talking about the apologizing to our loved ones. She said, I love that. It also encourages forgiveness. Holding grudges is a heavy burden. That's for sure. And I see this. I see this in families that don't do this, Jewish or Christian or Muslim or whatever. And there's so much fracturing. This one hurt this one in 1964, and, they're still not speaking. And those are the kinds of things people regret most on their deathbed, of course. So the instructions that date from, the 5 books of Moses teach us almost kind of artificially to live in such a way that you're not carrying those grudges, right? Okay, so let's go to the Hebrew now, Vayikra. And let's see if there's any beautiful words. And I've been hearing from people who follow this series, and I'm always a little hesitant to read too much Hebrew because it might just be gibberish to people who don't read Hebrew. But a lot of people who listen to this a lot of people listen to this as they're walking on podcasts, which is really nice. But they say they really love the Hebrew. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit. And it starts out, V'yedaber Adonai, and spoke God, El Moshe Lemor, toward Moses to say. And by the way, this sentence has 2 versions of the Hebrew for to speak, and you know them from other chapters. Ledaber, which has the same root as davar, which is thing, and word are the same, always mind-blowing. But it's more colloquial, like conversational. And it also says lomar, like saying, that is to say, which is more just descriptive. So it really stresses that the Lord is speaking to Moses. All right. Daber, right? Speak. El bnei Israel, toward the children of Israel. Lemor, to say. Nefesh ki techet, and again, a soul, not a person, but a soul. Nefesh, a spirit, ki techet, who shall miss the mark, bishgaga, unintentionally, mikol mitzot Adonai, from all of the mitzvot Adonai, I'm sorry, it's not punctuated very clearly, all the commandments, and you can hear that word mitzvah, which is a commandment, a good deed of God, asher lo ta'asena, ve'asa, which you shall not do them, and he did it, me'achat mehena, from one of these. Im hakohen hamashiach, if the anointed Cohen yechet, sins or misses the mark. Now, what is that word? You heard that word. Im hakohen hamashiach. You recognize that word Mashiach? It is the root of Messiah, and it means anointed, but here it literally just means anointed. So this is foreshadowing a deep, debate we're going to have when we get to the New Testament about what does Mashiach mean, because it means something very different in Hebrew than in, than in Christianity, right? But here, Mashiach means anointed with oil, as the Kohen is. So if the anointed Kohen will miss the mark, le'ashmat, and there's that word ashma, le'ashmat ha'am, to the guilt of the people, ve'hikriv al chetato, and he brings for his sin asher chata, which he committed, which he sinned, par ben bakar, an unblemished young bull, tamim, again that word innocent or pure, ladonai lechetat, to God for his having missed the mark. And then he'll, slaughter it, and the anointed Kohen will take the bull's blood. This is all pretty straightforward. And then let's move down to the other person who sins. And here we are. We talked about the priest, the entire community of Israel, not just a person. You see it going from the individual to the priest, and now it's the whole community. Ve'im kol adat Israel, and if the whole community of Israel, yishku v'ne'elam, davar me'enei hakahal, because a thing was hidden from the eyes of the community or the congregation, ve'asu achat mikol mitzvot Adonai, and did one from all the commandments of God, asher lo ta'asena ve'eshamu, which do not do them, and guilt is incurred, right? Or offenses committed, right? V'nod'a hachatat, and is known their sin, asher chatu, which they sinned, aleha, on her, v'hikrivu hakahal, and you remember that word because it's from the last chapter, and they neared the congregation, what means they'll bring the congregation will bring par ben bakar, a young bull, lechatat, to their sin as a sin offering, veheviu oto lifnei ohel moed, and they will bring it before the tent of meeting. And then the elders of the community, so everyone's participating, right? The whole community messed up. The whole community is sacrificing this animal. V'samchu ziknei ha'eda, and they will put the elders of the community, et yadehem al rosh hapar, their hands on the head of the bullock, lifnei Adonai, before God, ushachat et hapar, and they'll slaughter, and that's the same root as shochet, which is a ritual slaughter, the bull lifnei Adonai, before God. Vehevi hakohen hamashiach, again that word, and the Kohen who is anointed will bring from the blood midam hapar, of the bull, el ohel moed, and then he'll dip it and separate the fat and do all the things and burn it. Now, who is the last person? Oh, there's two more. If a leader sins and unintentionally commits all the commandments of the Lord, asher nasi yecheta, if a prince, really, nasi is a prince, or I guess you could say leader, yecheta ve'asa achat, will err and do one of all the mitzvot. And again, the repetition, I'm just going to read it for the repetition. Achat mikol mitzvot Adonai Elohav, God your Lord, asher lo ta'asena, which you mustn't do, bishgaga ve'ashem, unintentionally, and committed an offense, o hod'a elav, when his sin is made known to him, lada'at is to know, chatato, his offense, asher chata, which he offended, ba, in it, vehivi et korbano, and he will bring his, and you remember that word from last time, korban, his sacrifice, his offering, seir, a male goat, zachar, male, tamim, innocent, pure, unblemished. And again, he'll lean his hand forcefully, he'll slaughter it, and then the Kohen will do what the Kohen does. And then lastly, im nefesh achat, if one person of the people of the land, techeta, bishgaga, me'am haaretz, be'asta achat memitzvot Adonai, and committed one of the commandments of God, asher lo ta'asena ve'ashem. That's interesting. It's hard to understand. By his committing one of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed. I think the implication is committing against one of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed. Ve'ashem, and he's guilty or he's caused an offense. Ohoda elav, if his sin that is committed be made known to him. Chatato, his sin, asher chata, which he committed. Vehevi korbano, he'll bring his offering. Seirat izim tmima, an unblemished female goat. Nekeva al chatato asher chata, for the sin that he committed. And he will sacrifice them and lean his hand forcefully, and they'll, sacrifice them as before. And then the last line is the Kohen, HaKohen otam hamizbecha, v'hiktir and the Kohen will bring them hamizbecha toward the altar, al ishe Adonai, on the fire of God, really. U chiper alav, and there's that word lekaper. We remember it from Mount Sinai. Kippurim it's the root of Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur, and it means to have compassion, to forgive. Like v'kiper alav haKohen. The Kohen shall make atonement for him. It's also atoning, right? HaKohen al chatato, on his sin, asher chata v'nislach lo, on the sin which he sinned, or the offense which he committed, and he'll forgive him. So there are two words, lekaper, which is more like to atone, and nislach lo is a very profound word. Lisloach is literally to forgive, but also to let it go. It's got that implication, not just of forgiving, but okay, ani solachat, like it's done, it's over, I'm letting it go. So that's that. We are done with our time for today. Let's see if we have any important, well, they're all important. I hope that that's been interesting to you. I hope you can hear that resonance of forgive, lekaper. Just to mention, I'm talking about different kind of Hebrew versus Christian. I'm not saying Jewish because Judaism didn't exist yet. Ideas in language. So atonement is really forgiveness oriented, right? When you atone, God forgives you. That's our deal, right? And there isn't exactly the same math in Christianity, right? You can ask God for forgiveness, but you can't really atone in the same way. You don't know for sure, right? Maybe you do, because Jesus, died for our sins in Christianity. Maybe I'm imagining a psychological burden that doesn't exist. But I just want you to think about the idea of atoning, because I think a lot of us are really crippled with guilt, and atonement is such a great idea. There's so much to be done with atonement, right? So much healing. When this argument about reparations, sure, there have to be ways we atone for harms. They don't have to be crippling. They don't have to be devastating. They don't have to be hate-based, but we can atone, that's why I like memorials, for instance, for internment camps or for slavery or things we did wrong, right? It's a way of saying we messed up, chatanu, right? We committed an offense. Let's be responsible for it. Let's bring it to light. Okay, so, and by the way, on Yom Kippur, there's a beautiful melody which will make you cry. And it starts out, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Ratznu, Dibarnu Dofi, Ta'inu, Titanu. And these are listing all the ways we messed up, right? And it starts with Ashamnu, like guilt is ours, like we blew it, we offended, we messed up. And Chatanu, we missed the mark. So you learned about a lot. You learned that you can sin unintentionally, you're still responsible. You learned that there's a lot of forgiveness out there. It's immediate, it's guaranteed, but you have to meet God halfway, right? At the meeting place. And now let's just go to, I hate going to the Revised Standard Version because it's always so depressingly prosaic, but let's just look at some of these words and see how they're translated. So yeah, it's very straightforward. Line 3, if it is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people. Well, it really doesn't say that exactly in Hebrew. Then let him offer for the sin which he has committed a young bull, etc. And then they sacrifice the bull, they deal with the bull. If the whole congregation of Israel commits a sin unwittingly and the thing is hidden from the eyes of the assembly, and they do any one of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done and are guilty, when the sin which they have committed becomes known, the assembly shall offer a young bull for a sin offering and bring it before the tent of meeting. So the language is very church-oriented, like assembly. Kahal is more like community. It could be assembly, but it's like a congregation. When a ruler sins, doing unwittingly any of all the things which the Lord his God has commanded not to be done and is guilty, if the sin which he's committed is made known to him. Yeah, this is, accurate enough, but I would say it doesn't have the resonance of the language that I've shared with you. And it's all about sin, sin. Whereas, Chet and Ashema are about doing badly and fixing it, right? Which are different. And then it ends, and the priest shall make atonement for the sin which he has committed, and he shall be forgiven. So he does get forgiven. Interestingly, the Hebrew said, Eshat Adonai, the fire of God. And this is offerings by fire to the Lord, which I would say, again, brings the action or the stress to the intermediary. Whereas before anyone, can do their part of the sacrifice, committing their offering to God's fire, right? So that's just really interesting that God's fire has been reduced to offerings by fire to the Lord. It's, I would say, much less poetic. And again, there's that very boring, pleasing odor to the Lord instead of the very beautiful phrase, Reach nichoach l'Adonai, which we talked about. And that's RSV. I wonder which of these versions makes you feel closest to God, most hopeful. But I guess I would say, Annette Slaby says, God has a system of justice. That is true. For sure, and I'm going to end here, reading the Hebrew Bible has made me realize you can't be a slacker. I can't be a slacker, right? You can't, there's no half measures, everything is seen, everything is known. There's a recourse for everything, no matter how badly you mess up. God's waiting at the tent of meeting, or he's probably waiting in your head, right? Or, sitting on your bed or whatever, all around you. But it's, there's nothing so horrible that you could do that is not forgivable and forgiven by God, but you have to, as they say in AA, it works if you work it. I'm not in AA. I've just been very struck that AA kind of reintroduces kind of Old Testament behavior, which people really like. It turns out, we've talked about this, people really like boundaries. They like to know what the rules are, and they like to know how to get closer to God. And I think it's very positive to know that like we have a role, there are things we're expected to do. We're not supposed to be passive. We're supposed to be always in conversation with God, coming to God, taking responsibility when we mess up, to God and to our fellow men and women, animals. I mean, yeah. So Carolyn Carson is on a roll today. She said, fire of God, transmutation. That sounds right. That's right. It is. It's taking this very material thing like meat or, flesh or meal and Eshet Adonai, fire, God, fire, transmuting it to something higher. Excuse me. And Netislabi says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Well, I need to find that quote in context because I know it's correct and we've probably read it already. Netta, can you put the citation if you got it handy? But I don't know that it's kind of the message of this particular, set of passages, because presumably, well, maybe so, because these are God's people doing God's stuff, or God wants them to do his stuff. And so maybe it is a chet to attack God's people, like it's maybe more of a chet to harass someone who's trying to distribute food than to harass someone who's, I don't know, lying around bothering children, right? I don't know. It's been a long day. I should stop there. But it is about accountability. This is definitely about accountability and forgiveness and our role in it. So on that note, I will sign off. You've been so generous to join me. Almost 2,000 people watching live. I know I said I'd try to do it always at 6 because that is easier for a lot of people, but I wasn't able to today. A friend of mine is having a screening. Actually, I will tell people in case they're in New York, the Actors Studio is having a screening of John Buffalo Mailer's movie about his dad, Norman Mailer, which is a wonderful movie. It's a documentary. I highly recommend that you go see it if you're in Midtown Manhattan or can get there by 7. And otherwise, bless you all. There I can say it. I used to be able to say things like that. And if you like these, we need help. As you know, there's a whole team that gets these videos out into the world. So please subscribe to Outspoken on Substack and to Daily Clout or donate. And I appreciate you. And within 48 hours, I will read Leviticus 5. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.